Welcome, adventurer. I'm glad you've joined our journey. To make sure you don't miss the best parts, hit that subscribe button, and we'll be on our way. I first crossed paths with Gwen on my initial day at the office. She worked at the front desk, the one who handed me a temporary ID and pointed me toward where I needed to go. Calling myself captivated by her jet black hair and striking sapphire eyes wouldn't even come close to the truth. Saying I was completely taken with her would have been more accurate. One of the first things I noticed was the absence of a ring on her hand. By the time I walked away from her desk, I had already made up my mind. I was going to try and pursue her. Of course, that was far easier to imagine than to actually accomplish. Someone like Gwen probably had men swarming around her constantly. She had her pick from a sea of admirers. I'd just be another face in the crowd, and I didn't bring anything particularly exceptional to the table. Sure, I didn't think I was unattractive, and I kept myself in pretty solid shape. Years of high school and college sports had left me fairly fit, and after seeing some of my old teammates bulk up post-graduation, I made a personal vow to avoid that path. So I signed up at a gym and committed to regular workouts. Even so, I was just another guy hoping to catch her eye. After Gwen turned down my attempts at asking her out, 7 times to be exact, I gave up. Ironically, it was walking away that actually caught her attention. Gwen was no stranger to being pursued by men. She'd rejected plenty of them, but most kept trying anyway. Apparently, I broke the pattern. I gave it a go, got nowhere, and walked away. That, it turned out, wasn't the typical response Gwen was used to. Roughly 2 months after that last failed attempt, I started noticing subtle changes. Gwen began smiling more often when we crossed paths. She initiated brief chats in the hallway. What I didn't realize at the time was that she was quietly nudging me back into orbit, like all the others. But I either missed the signals, or deep down, chose not to play along. Since I wasn't responding, she began taking a more direct approach. She started joining me during my coffee breaks at 10 and 2. Not that I minded, she was as stunning as ever after all. Then she began sitting with me in the cafeteria during lunch. Having a gorgeous woman make your lunch break more interesting? No complaints there. I didn't question her sudden attention. I also didn't make any moves. Even when she dropped a few subtle hints that she might be open to me asking her out, I stayed quiet. Things went on like this for about a month. Then, one Wednesday during our afternoon break, Gwen threw me a curveball. She invited me to be her date, not a romantic date per se, but a +1 for a family gathering. She needed someone to accompany her because from what she shared, there'd be people she'd rather avoid. Coming solo would have made her a target. Arriving with someone meant they'd keep their distance. At first I was skeptical. It felt a little calculated. But then again, maybe it really was just a matter of avoiding awkward interactions with some unwanted guests. Either way, I wasn't about to say no to spending time with Gwen, even if it wasn't officially a date. The event was an engagement celebration for her older brother and his soon-to-be wife. There were relatives, friends, and a whole mix of personalities. When I arrived with Gwen, I was introduced around, and she rarely strayed more than a few feet from my side. Pretty soon I realized my initial hunch had been spot on. There were definitely some old flames in attendance. At least 3 guys shot me death glares like they hoped I'd vanish. Judging by their interactions, I figured they were probably friends of her brother's that she'd dated at one point. That assumption got some backup when I saw one of those guys approach her brother for a brief exchange. Moments later, her brother Tony strolled over and politely asked if he could speak to Gwen privately. Gwen, having spotted the guy talking to her brother, didn't hold back. "You want me to wreck your party?" she asked. "If that loser comes anywhere near me, I'll make a scene that no one will forget." Tony stared at her for a long second, then turned and walked away without another word. Gwen stayed close to me after that, and we spent most of the evening chatting. She was practically glued to my side. That night I also met Tony's fiancée, and I was genuinely taken aback. If she hadn't already been engaged, I might have stolen a glance or two myself. She was the polar opposite of Gwen. Where Gwen was tall, confident, and smoldering, Alice stood around 5'1" or 5'2", with a wholesome, sweet look, like the girl you'd meet at a backyard barbecue. I think Gwen caught on that I noticed Alice, because before I could linger on it too long, she tugged on my sleeve and said she wanted to introduce me to someone. She led me over to a burly older man, maybe in his early 50s, sporting a thick white mustache that could easily be mistaken for a walrus's. As we approached, he looked me over and said, "What have you brought this time, princess? Another fly caught in your web?" With a small smile, Gwen replied, "Just a good friend, Uncle Dan." She made the introductions, and he gave me a crooked grin. "Watch out, kid! When she gets going, she can be intensely commanding." I laughed, but a part of me wondered, am I already in over my head? Especially if this wasn't her at full intensity. If this was her in idle. I wasn't sure I could handle her in high gear. I couldn't even picture it. He chuckled again. "In that case, kid, my advice? Run. Now. Put some space between you and her while you still can." She shook her head. "I should have known better than to introduce you to him." That's how I lose people. People? Boyfriend? I was a guy now? We chatted a while longer before my body reminded me I needed to find the bathroom. Uncle Dan gave me directions, and for the first time since we'd arrived, Gwen and I split up. I figured she'd be fine with her uncle until we made our way back home. I headed to the restroom, and when I stepped out, a man was standing there, clearly waiting his turn. As I passed him, he gave me a look and said, "You came with Gwen, right?" I nodded, a bit puzzled. "Watch yourself," he said. "Don't trust her." And with that ominous line, he slipped into the bathroom and shut the door behind him. Back in the main room, Gwen was nowhere near Uncle Dan. I began scanning the crowd. I bumped into Alice and asked if she'd seen Gwen. "She was talking with Gary," she said, nodding toward the door to the garage. "Listen, Gwen's amazing, Bob. But she's the kind of woman who needs someone strong. Just remember that, if things go further between you two." I was about to press her for more detail, but someone else came up to chat with her, and I was left to continue my search alone. I made my way toward the kitchen and pushed open the door that led to the attached garage. No Gwen in sight at first glance, but I could hear a voice that sounded like hers echoing in the concrete space. I stepped further in. That's when I saw her. It was Gwen, and the guy with her was Gary, the same man I'd noticed earlier talking to Tony, right before Tony came over and asked to borrow Gwen for a few minutes. Gary had her backed against the car's fender, hands gripping her arms, holding her there. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice sharp. "None of your damn business," Gary snapped. "Get lost." "It is my business," I said, stepping forward. "She's with me." "Buzz off," he growled. "Walk away." That was the wrong thing to say. I started toward him. He spun around, dropped into a combat stance, and threw a kick in my direction. That kind of move only works if you're faster than instinct, and he wasn't. I caught him with a solid right kick to the jaw. He folded instantly, collapsing to the floor. Turning to Gwen, I grabbed her hand. "Let's go." We left the garage, stepping back into the night air. She exhaled. "Thanks. If you hadn't come in, I was about to scream, and that would have blown up the whole party." "Who is that guy?" I asked. "Just an ex who didn't take the breakup well," she replied. "I dumped him for being a jerk. Or maybe he always was one, and I just didn't notice at first." She looked around. "We should head out. If he gets up and sees us, things could escalate. I don't want Alice's night ruined." We found Alice and Tony on the terrace, said a quick goodbye, and left the party. The night was still young, and I asked Gwen if she was up for doing something else. She said she was open to ideas. "How about country music?" I asked. "I like it," she said with a smile. So I took her to dinner at Santiago's, then we headed over to Buckskins to catch some live music. Without a Net was playing, a pretty solid band, actually. Gwen seemed to know most of the steps, and we ended up dancing quite a bit. It was easy, natural, fun. After a while, I excused myself to the men's room. While I was gone, the band started into a song that was perfect for the cowboy cha-cha-cha, a dance you could do solo or with a partner. When I returned to our table, I spotted Gwen on the dance floor, moving on her own. I stopped in my tracks. She dipped, turned, and swayed to the rhythm with effortless grace. Her dark hair moved like silk in the air, catching the light with every spin. In that moment, I wanted her more than I'd ever wanted anything in my life. But beneath that hunger was something colder, deeper, a truth I couldn't ignore. I would never really have her. Gwen was the kind of woman no one could fully possess. Too fierce, too free, too much for just one man. As the music ended and she returned to the table, I noticed nearly every man in the place had their eyes on her. Yeah, I wanted her badly, but I knew I'd never be able to keep her. And I doubted any man ever could. Didn't stop the wanting, though. We closed up the place and I offered to drive her home. During the ride, she told me it had been ages since she'd had that much fun and thanked me warmly for the evening. When we pulled into her driveway, she leaned in, kissed me gently, and thanked me once more. As I made my way back home, I couldn't help but question why fate, or perhaps the gods, seemed to enjoy toying with us. They had to know someone like Gwen wasn't meant to belong to just one man. And yet, they kept placing her in the path of men who couldn't resist her. Men like me. I also thought of Uncle Dan, Alice, and the guy who caught me on my way out of the bathroom at the engagement party. Each of them, in their own way, had warned me to tread carefully when it came to Gwen. That night, as I climbed into bed, I resolved to take their advice seriously. When I arrived at work Monday morning, Gwen greeted me with a bright smile and a cheerful, "Good morning." I smiled back and headed straight for my office. She joined me for our mid-morning and afternoon breaks, but the conversations we had were nothing more than casual small talk. Tuesday and Wednesday were much the same. She sat with me during both breaks and even joined me for lunch. Still, I didn't ask her out. Not because I didn't want to, I did. Desperately. But something inside me held back. I had a gut feeling that Gwen wouldn't take well to me if I pursued her too quickly, so I kept my distance. Thursday morning came, and Gwen didn't greet me with her usual smile. She skipped our breaks, avoided lunch with me, and gave no sign she even noticed I was there. By Friday, the silence between us had grown. She glanced up when I walked in, saw it was me, then looked away without a word. She stayed away during lunch and both breaks. Monday arrived, and I beat her to the office, dodging what I assumed would be another cold reception. At the 10 a.m. break, I was sitting quietly at a table in the break room when Gwen walked in. She paused when she saw me, took a few steps in my direction, then abruptly changed course and sat down at a table on the far side of the room. Though I didn't turn to look at her, I could feel her eyes on me the entire time. I spent lunch and the afternoon break out of the office that day. The next morning, however, Gwen greeted me with a smile once more and wished me a good morning. I returned the gesture politely and went straight to my desk to clear out the work that had piled up. When noon rolled around, I left the office for a bite at a diner just a few blocks away. I had just received my plate from the waitress when Gwen walked in. She scanned the room and, seeing my table was the only one with a free seat, made her way over. "Mind if I sit?" she asked. "Not at all," I replied. She ordered her meal, and while we waited, we chatted, mostly about work and a few familiar faces. As soon as the waitress returned with her food, Gwen looked up at me and asked, "Why don't you like me?" The question caught me completely off guard. "What makes you think I don't?" I asked. "You never ask me out," she said. "That's not really fair," I told her. "I asked you out more than 6 times, and you turned me down every single time." Eventually, I got the hint. She looked at me and said, "That night after the engagement party, when you dropped me off, I told you how much fun I'd had and I kissed you at the door. That was me saying, 'Call me.' I wanted it to happen again. But you never followed through." I sighed. "Well, I guess I just don't speak girl talk." She smirked. "Then I guess I'll have to teach you." "Do you have plans tonight?" "Nothing I can't get out of," I said. "Good. Then maybe tonight will be your first lesson." As I looked at Gwen, I couldn't help but feel confused. She was magnetic, gorgeous, confident, and I was, well, not. So why was she coming on to me? Maybe I wasn't remarkable, but I wasn't dumb either. There was no way I was going to pass up this chance. "What time?" I asked. "6 work for you?" she replied. "Perfect." When I arrived to pick her up, she was dressed in jeans and a brush popper tee. As soon as I saw her, she grinned. "Bet you can guess what I've got in mind." I suddenly felt ridiculous, standing there in a suit and tie. Thankfully, I had a gym bag in the car with a sweatshirt I could throw on. Even then, next to her, I felt a little clumsy, but it didn't matter. We headed to Buckskins and had an amazing night. It turned out they offered free dance lessons every Wednesday and Thursday. That night's lesson was West Coast swing, something neither of us had ever tried. We stumbled through it together, laughing, learning, and loving every minute of it. Our sessions ran from 7 to 9 in the evening, broken up by a 10-minute intermission. During those short pauses, we'd gather at a table, sip our drinks, and talk, mainly to get to know each other better. That's when I discovered she had 3 siblings, 2 brothers and a sister. She'd earned a 2-year degree in business administration and was working as a secretary while searching for a better opportunity. Red was her favorite color. She was a soccer fan, though oddly, her favorite football team was the Denver Broncos, and in baseball, she rooted for the Detroit Tigers. She had absolutely no interest in basketball, hockey, or even soccer as a sport she followed. Her music tastes leaned toward the traditional. She loved classical, bluegrass, Dixieland, jazz, and oldies from decades past. She had no patience for genres like rap, hip-hop, heavy metal, or hard rock. When it came to films, she preferred high-energy action flicks over more refined or artsy ones. One of her favorite hobbies involved trips to the shooting range, where she practiced with her Llama .380 handgun. All in all, she seemed like someone I could really connect with. When I walked her to the door after one class, she surprised me with a kiss and then asked, "What did I just tell you? What do you want me to call?" She grinned and said, "You aced your first test. I'll have you fluent in girl speak in no time." As I drove home that night, my thoughts were split. One part of me wanted to cling to Gwen, to hold tight and not let go. The other warned me to steer clear, to protect myself from potential heartbreak. In the end, I listened to the part that wanted her. For the next couple of months, Gwen and I met up regularly, anywhere from once to 3 times a week. During that stretch, she landed a better job, which meant I stopped seeing her during lunches and breaks. I wasn't a fan of her new position. It often kept her late and interfered with our plans. Eventually, I started thinking seriously about our future. I even began browsing for engagement rings, but before I could settle on one, everything unraveled. It was a Thursday, and Gwen and I had made plans for that evening. At least, we had until she called during the day to say she'd be running late. I didn't feel like hanging around my place alone, so I figured I'd swing by Buckskins. Maybe they were offering line dancing lessons. I wouldn't mind learning with a stranger. I figured I'd have a drink while I was there, but I didn't want to drink on an empty stomach. As I drove through Claremont, a sign caught my eye. Angelus, Fine Italian Dining. I figured, why not? As soon as I stepped into the restaurant, I saw her, Gwen. She was sitting in a booth beside a man I didn't recognize. Not across from him, beside him. His left hand was on the table, and she was holding it with her right. They smiled at each other. I didn't say a word. I turned around, walked out, got in my car, and left. Buckskins was no longer on my mind. Normally, I might have stopped for a drink after a class, but not that night. I wasn't in the mood anymore. Instead, I drove to Bud's, a place where I could drown the sting with something stronger. While heading there, I tried to talk myself down. I reminded myself that from the very beginning, I'd known Gwen wasn't someone I could keep. Once I got to Bud's, I grabbed a seat in the back and started drinking away the ache. As I sipped, I wondered if her working late excuses were all just lies, if she'd been seeing that guy or others the whole time. I had too much to drink, more than I should have. But I was still clear-headed enough to give Mike my car keys and ask him to call me a cab. "Okay," he joked. "You're a cab," and then picked up the phone to make the call. The cab dropped me off at home, where I crashed into bed. I woke up with a splitting headache the next morning, one I had fully expected after the night at Bud's. A few aspirin and some strong black coffee made me halfway functional, just enough to get to work. Thankfully, it was a busy day. Focusing on the job helped push thoughts of Gwen to the back of my mind, at least until just before I got fired. But once I clocked out that afternoon, Gwen came rushing back into my thoughts, especially when I had to call a cab to get back to Bud's and retrieve my car. That call alone brought back the memory of why I'd left it there to begin with. I got my keys from Mike, downed a beer, and drove off. There was no room in my budget to wallow. The 2 cab fares, home from Bud's to work in the morning, then back to Bud's again, plus what I'd spent on drinks, had already left a dent in my finances. Driving home, I reflected on everything and wondered why I'd let Gwen pull me into this mess. Deep down, I always knew we weren't meant to last. I was lucky to have had any time with her at all. It was bound to end eventually, and now it had. It was time to move forward. I gathered all my camping gear and headed for Lake Martin. I spent the weekend soaking in the sun and reconnecting with nature. When I got home Sunday night, the blinking red light on my answering machine greeted me. 9 messages. 8 were from Gwen. I deleted each one as soon as I heard her voice. Didn't even listen to the content. The quicker I erased her from my life, the better. The last message was from a guy asking me to endorse his run for city council. That one got deleted too. Monday flew by, but when I got back home that night, the machine's red light blinked again. 4 new messages. 3 were from Gwen. The 4th caught me off guard. I found myself wondering why she was calling the landline and not my cell. A quick glance answered that. I had turned my phone off before heading to the lake and never powered it back on. Thinking it over, I realized it was probably for the best. Otherwise, it might have kept going off and ruining my weekend. I chose to leave it off until the next morning. Then came the unexpected call. No elaborate message, just "call me," followed by a phone number. The voice was familiar, and I suddenly found myself at a crossroads. Should I return the call or ignore it? Then I chuckled, half annoyed with myself. Of course I'd call back. How could I not? My curiosity wouldn't let me rest otherwise. That voice belonged to Harlena Collins, my girlfriend from the moment we met in 8th grade all the way through the first half of our senior year in college. Both of our families had already assumed we'd be married after graduation. Honestly, our moms were already knee-deep in wedding plans. But everything unraveled after that. It started innocently enough, the kind of thing that happens at most colleges, maybe even some high schools. One of her professors broke the class into groups and gave them a group assignment. Lena, short for Harlena, had to meet with her team in the library to plan and research. She missed a few of our dates because of it, but I didn't think much of it. I'd been through the same thing in my own classes. I remember the specific day clearly, a Wednesday. Lena and I had plans to see a local art show. Art wasn't really my thing, but the artist was a friend of hers, so I agreed to go for her sake. She called just after my 4 p.m. class, saying she'd have to bail because her group had hit a snag and needed to meet. Since I was only going to support her anyway, I figured I'd skip the event altogether. Instead, I found myself at the student union, sipping a Coke and reviewing notes when Artie, my friend, walked up to me. No greeting, no small talk, just, "You and I go back a long way, right?" "Yeah, sure, why?" "Have I ever lied to you before?" "Not that I can remember." "Well, I hate being the one to say this, but I think Harlena's cheating on you." I froze. "What are you talking about?" "I've seen her around with some big dude. 3 times. She's working on a school project," I told him. He shook his head. "This wasn't a study group, man. It was just the 2 of them. And they weren't exactly hitting the books, more like kissing and playing around like a couple." "When was this?" "Monday, then again on Wednesday and Thursday. All 3 nights, the same ones she'd claimed she'd be in the library with her group." "Where'd you see them?" I asked. "Angie's," he said. Artie worked at Angie's, a bar and restaurant across town, washing dishes to help cover his tuition. It wasn't a place I'd ever just stumble into. I'd only been there twice in 4 years, and not at all in the last 2. I packed up my books and nodded. "Thanks for the heads up." "What are you gonna do?" "Well, considering she just canceled again and the last 3 times she supposedly had group meetings turned out to be dates with this guy, I've got a pretty strong urge to drive over to Angie's. They usually show up around 7, Artie warned. And this guy? He's huge. Looks like trouble." "I'll be there anyway," he said. "If it gets ugly, I've got your back." It took me about 30 minutes to get to Angie's, and I parked where I had a clear view of the lot. Didn't take long. Right around 7, I saw a car pull in and Lena step out with a guy. Big guy. Maybe 6 feet tall, 220 pounds or more. They kissed before walking in hand. The kiss and the hand-holding confirmed everything I needed to know. I almost drove away, almost. But then I thought, screw that, and got out of the car. I walked into the restaurant and found them in a booth, Lena with her back to me. I walked up and said, "Hey there, Harlena. Looks like you're deep into your project." Strange, though. This place doesn't look much like a library to me. I used to think she went pale was just a figure of speech, until I saw her face just then. Out of sheer spite, I asked, "So tell me, Harlena, how long have you been screwing around?" The guy barked at me. "Hey, jackass, don't talk to her like that. Walk away before I make you." "Screw off," I snapped. "I'll say whatever I damn well please to my ex-fiancée." He started to get up. I reached for the mug of beer in front of him and flung it in his face. As his hands flew up in surprise, I gripped the handle tight and slammed the bottom of the mug into his head. He toppled over and slumped into the booth. I know it wasn't exactly a fair move on my part, but the guy stood at 6 feet 4 inches and I barely cleared 5 feet 11 inches. He was built like a linebacker at 220 pounds, while I barely tipped the scale at 85. I'd have been a complete fool to let him leave that booth where he could get within arm's reach of me. Turning to Lena, I said, "You're the one who gets to explain to your moms why that wedding isn't happening." And then, without giving her a chance to reply, I added, "Don't even think about calling me with some half-baked excuse about how everything's a misunderstanding and nothing really mattered." I was done. "I don't want to hear from you again," I said. "I hope your life turns out miserable, Harlena." I gave the table one last look, gestured toward Artie, and walked straight out of the restaurant. I spotted her on campus now and then, but I made a point of keeping my distance. Not once did I speak to her again. 2 years passed, then I got a call. Just a simple "call me." My curiosity got the better of me. Before I made the call, though, I figured I needed something to brace myself, grabbed a snack and poured a tall Jack and water to help steady the nerves. By 8 p.m., I was finally ready to hear whatever she had to say, thanks in no small part to the whiskey. I dialed. 4 rings later, someone picked up, and then I heard her voice. "I wondered if you'd call," she said. "Caller ID is a beautiful thing, isn't it?" "You knew I'd be curious enough to call," I said. "Can we meet up for a drink somewhere?" "Not tonight," I replied. "I've already had enough Jack to last me." "Then pick a time and a place." For a few seconds, I considered hanging up and deleting her number for good. A phone call was one thing. Seeing her face-to-face was something else entirely. But curiosity had already sunk its teeth in me. "How about Bud's Bar tomorrow at 6? I asked. "That works," she said. "Thanks, Bob." I hung up and sat staring at the phone, wondering if I'd made a mistake. She was part of a chapter I'd closed long ago. Maybe it should have stayed closed. I got to Bud's at 5:45, figuring I'd get a drink or two in before she arrived. Some liquid courage. But when I walked in, she was already there. She looked good. She always did. She was nothing like Gwen. Gwen had a smoldering, magnetic quality. Lena was more like Alice, the kind of girl you'd picture in a sun-dappled backyard with a lemonade in hand. As I reached the booth, she stood up and offered her hand. "Thanks for coming," she said. I shook her hand briefly and sat down. Almost immediately, Tina appeared and set a drink down in front of me. I glanced over to the bar and saw Mike watching from a distance. He gave me a thumbs up. I nodded and smiled back. I lifted my glass, took a slow sip, and asked, "So what's this about, Harlena?" "I'm trying to get something back that I lost," she said. "And what's that?" "You," she answered. "The last 2 years have been awful without you. I've missed you like hell. Everything went wrong after you left. I know I'm the reason, but there's an empty space where you used to be. I want you to come back. I want you in my life again." I said nothing, just kept sipping at my drink, staring at the table. She couldn't handle the silence. "I know I hurt you, Bob," she continued. "I didn't mean to. I really didn't. But the truth is, I never thought you'd find out. Before graduation, before we started building a life together, I needed to clear something from my mind. I should have been honest. I was scared of how you'd take it." She paused, shook her head. "No, that's not completely true. I knew exactly how you'd take it. That's why I kept quiet. I was terrified you'd walk away, and I guess I was right." Still, I said nothing, just drank. She was watching me, clearly waiting for a response. Anything. The silence was wearing on her. She turned away, took a sip of her own drink, and then said, "I just wanted to know what other guys were like. What made them tick, how they treated women, how they acted around their friends. I wasn't trying to replace you. I was just curious. That's all. I was happy with you. I really was. But I still wanted to know." And after all that, no one else even came close. In the past 2 years, I've gone on dates with over 20 different men, hoping one of them might replace the emptiness you left behind. But none of them even came close. I haven't been able to move on. I don't know if you're aware, but every few weeks I call your mom just to hear how you're doing. That was news to me. After Harlena and I broke up, my mom wouldn't stop pushing me to reach out to her. "You and Harlena belong together, Bobby. Everyone sees it but you." Eventually, I snapped. I told her that if she brought up Harlena one more time, I'd stop visiting altogether. She must have taken me seriously because she never mentioned her again. Now, sitting across from Lena, hearing everything she had to say, I tried to sift through the truth and the lies. The very fact that she was here, face to face, pouring her heart out, told me she still felt something for me. Something real. But at the same time, I couldn't shake the feeling that not everything she said was the full truth. I wanted to believe her, and I think part of me did. But belief without evidence is dangerous. All I had were old memories flickering in my mind like static. I still hadn't responded, unsure how she'd interpret the silence. She inhaled slowly, then said, "I don't feel the need to explore anymore. I just want to see if we can reclaim what we had." Her eyes held mine for a moment longer before she stood up. "You know how to reach me, think it over." And then she left, leaving me sitting there with a head full of questions I doubted she'd ever answer honestly. But one thing stuck with me, when she said she had no more curiosity. If she truly meant that, did I dare believe her? I wasn't sure, but I knew the thought would follow me home. When I walked into my place, the answering machine had 2 identical messages from Gwen. "Bob, please call me the moment you get this." I couldn't figure out why she hadn't just used my cell. I took it from its holster and noticed it was off. I didn't remember powering it down, and when I tried to turn it on, I saw the battery had died. I plugged it in and thought about whether I should just call Gwen and get whatever this was over with. I told myself, just get it done. I punched in her number, but it rang through to voicemail. She was probably out with someone and didn't want to be interrupted, I guessed. Maybe that was the universe telling me not to call her at all. As I lay in bed later, thoughts of Lena circled in my mind. The next morning, I got ready for the day, shower, shave, grabbed the phone from the charger, and headed off. I stopped for breakfast at the Village Inn, then arrived at the office feeling unusually upbeat. That lasted until Lois, who had taken over Gwen's role, dropped a fat pile of message slips on my desk and said, "Can you please get her to stop? She's driving me nuts." I flipped through the stack. About 2/3 were from Gwen, all with variations of the same urgent note. "Call me as soon as possible." I picked up the phone and dialed her number. She picked up on the 3rd ring. "I'm at work." "Can't talk now. Call me tonight." "Bye." And she hung up. I stared at the receiver in my hand, thinking about all the times I had gone out of my way to call her back right away. The day rolled on and stayed busy, but once I had some breathing room, I didn't call Gwen. I called Harlena. I asked if she'd be up for dinner. She said yes. She gave me her address and I headed out. Just as I was getting in the car, my phone lit up. Gwen was calling. I let it go to voicemail. Dinner with Harlena was calm, even pleasant. So much so that I asked if she wanted to go out again on Friday. She agreed. When I brought her home, she tried to pull me inside for a drink. The old Lena might have tempted me, and part of me did want to go in. But I held back. "Too soon, Lena," I said. "I'm not quite ready for that." What I didn't say was that I needed to be sure her so-called lack of curiosity was real before I could trust her again. While I was with Lena, I'd shut off my phone. Walking back to the car, I turned it on again. 2 voicemails from Gwen popped up. I checked the time, just after 11. She had said to call her right away, so I did. She picked up groggily. "Bob, do you have any idea what time it is? You asked me to call. This is my 3rd attempt today. The first call went unanswered and you ignored the second. Why didn't you try calling one more time, just a bit earlier?" Because I had plans. A date, actually, and calling you then wouldn't have been appropriate. It would have been completely out of line to make that call while I was with someone else. Wait, you were on a date? With a woman? Yeah, Gwen, a woman. I assumed you already knew that men aren't really my thing. Still, a date? With a girl? I thought you and Bob had something real. So did I. At least until I saw you holding hands with some guy at Angie's the same night you ditched our date, claiming you had to work late. And honestly, don't expect me to believe it was just a fast bite before you rushed back to the office. Angelo's isn't even close to the Fisher building. There are 2 restaurants inside the Fisher, plus half a dozen more places within a few blocks. If you really needed a quick lunch, there was no reason to drive all the way across town. Sorry if I woke you, goodbye. I hung up. The phone rang almost instantly. Gwen's name lit up the screen, but I wasn't in the mood to talk. So I powered the phone off. When I got back to my place, the answering machine's red light was blinking. I didn't even bother checking the messages, just switched the phone and the machine off and went straight to bed. The next morning at work, I asked Lois to handle Gwen if she called. I told her she wasn't to take messages from her. If Gwen kept calling, she was to hang up, no exceptions. Maybe it wasn't the bravest move, but I didn't care. That night I stayed in, peacefully. No calls, no texts. My phone was off and unplugged. I watched some TV, eventually shut it off, and picked up the book I'd been reading. When I got to the office the next day, Lois greeted me with a knowing smile. Gwen had finally stopped calling. The workday passed quickly, and that evening I picked up Lena and we went out to dinner. After we ate, we headed to the pit for some drinks and dancing. Lena and I were in good spirits when I dropped her off. And when she invited me in for a nightcap, I didn't hesitate. She led me to the couch while she fixed us drinks in the kitchen. With a sly smile, she placed our glasses on the end table and said, "Follow me to the bedroom, lover." We didn't waste any time. By the time I made it back home Sunday night, I was wiped out. The second my head hit the pillow, I was out cold. The next 2 weeks followed a similar rhythm. Work and Lena filled most of my time. Some nights I woke up in her bed. Other nights she woke up in mine. Gwen had gone quiet, at least over the phone. But that didn't mean she'd stopped trying. Twice I spotted her lingering in the office parking lot. Both times I slipped out through the loading dock, walked a few blocks, and caught a cab from the bar nearby. Once I saw her parked outside my apartment as I was heading home. I managed to turn around before she noticed me and went to that sports bar I sometimes used as a hiding place. Lena had been pushing hard for us to move in together. I wasn't sure I was ready to take that leap. There were several reasons why. For one, I couldn't shake the feeling that Lena wasn't done scratching names off her curiosity list. And then there was Gwen. I had always been honest with myself. I still had feelings for her. And I knew I couldn't commit fully to Lena or anyone while those feelings still lingered. It probably sounds pathetic, and I knew it did. I always thought Gwen was out of my league, that anything real between us wouldn't last. She was too much woman for me, or maybe I wasn't enough man for her. Still, I couldn't stop thinking about her. Even with all the reasons I had to push her away, she was always there, embedded in my thoughts. Eventually, it seemed Gwen gave up. She stopped showing up. Weeks passed without a trace of her, and with her absence, my attachment began to fade. As Gwen slipped into the background, Lena and I grew closer. I finally agreed to let her move in. 3 months went by. Lena tried everything to convince me to take the final step and put a ring on her finger. I hesitated. Right up until the night I found her in my bed with some other guy. It was a Tuesday morning when I stepped out of my apartment, suitcase in hand, headed for the airport. My destination was Chicago, where I was scheduled to attend a 3-day strategy meeting regarding our company's acquisition of a major rival. As I waited at the gate, my phone vibrated with a message from my boss. The meeting had been pushed back a week. The owner of the company we were acquiring had just passed away. I tried calling Lena to fill her in on the sudden change, but my call went straight to voicemail. I assumed she was caught up in meetings or just hadn't checked her phone. No big deal. She'd hear the message sooner or later. With no trip ahead of me, I went into the office and worked through the day as usual. That evening, I drove home. When I pulled into the parking lot and saw Lena's car parked in her usual spot, I smiled, half expecting to come into the smell of dinner on the stove. But as I walked through the door, the kitchen was cold and quiet, nothing cooking. Instead, I heard something else coming from the bedroom. The sounds were unmistakable. I walked to the door and peeked in. There was Lena, caught up in a very intimate moment with some guy. Apparently, she hadn't bothered to check her phone all day. Her purse was sitting on the kitchen table, so I walked over, opened it, and pulled out her phone. There it was, my voicemail waiting to be listened to. I stepped back to the bedroom doorway, turned on speakerphone, and hit play. My voice filled the room. "Hey, sweetie, change of plans. Meeting got canceled. I'll be home at the regular time tonight. Love you. Bye." They both turned their heads toward me. Their shock was probably equal to mine, but for a different reason. Because the guy she was with, he was the same one I'd caught her with the last time we broke up. I just stood there, shaking my head in disbelief. "I'll be out for a couple hours, Lena," I said calmly. "When I get back, I want you and every last thing you own gone, and don't ever try to contact me again." I walked out without waiting for a response. When I returned later that night, true to my request, Lena and her belongings had vanished. Getting over her didn't take too long. Honestly, I'd always had a nagging sense that something wasn't right with her. Not long after, I received a promotion at work that came with a steady stream of travel. For the next couple of months, I was hardly ever home, bouncing between cities as I adjusted to the new role. Eventually, I was able to structure my travel so I'd always be back by Thursday night. That first free weekend, I decided to treat myself to a proper night out, dinner and a few drinks. It was Friday, and after eating at Tricacci's, I made my way to Buckskins, a bar known for its country western crowd and live music. The Dawson James Band was playing that night. They were solid performers, though not exactly spontaneous. Every time I'd seen them, they stuck to the same songs, same order, even the same so-called ad-libs. Still, they were a good time, especially for dancing. There were plenty of single women there, but I wasn't in the mood for the usual small talk or pickup games. I stuck to line dancing, blending into the crowd. I had just finished a long set, the cowboy cha-cha-cha-cha-cha-cha, and was nursing a Pabst Blue Ribbon when I heard a voice behind me. "Hey there, stranger." I turned to see Gwen standing by my stool. She looked incredible, just like always. She smiled and said, "I'm here with a couple friends and saw you sitting alone. Want to join us?" I hesitated. "Wouldn't want to interrupt your night." "You won't," she said. "We could use a solid dance partner. I remember you could hold your own." At first, I'd assumed she was out with a guy, which made my stomach twist. I didn't want to see her with someone else, even though I knew she wasn't mine. But 3 women? That was something I could handle. I got up and followed her to the table, where she introduced me to her friends, Sarah and Stacy. We spent the night talking, laughing, and taking turns dancing. By the time midnight rolled around, I was ready to call it. Stacy tried to talk me into staying a bit longer, but I gave her a white lie about needing to be up early. Truth was, I had no plans the next morning. The reality? Being around Gwen was emotionally exhausting. Most of the dances she and I shared didn't leave room for much talking. Fast-paced steps like the Oriental Swing and Texas Two-Step. With Sarah and Stacy, I reserved all the slow dances. Maybe it was the drinks, or maybe I was still holding on to something, but I almost asked Gwen out again. But deep down, I remembered why we ended. And a voice inside me whispered clearly, "Don't put yourself through that again." So I did the smart thing. I got up and left, before I did something I'd regret. Just as I was getting ready to head out, Sarah spoke up. "We're usually around on Fridays," she said, "and while I can't speak for everyone, I had a great time dancing with you." "I'd love to do it again." "I'm with her on that," Stacy added, echoing the sentiment. What caught me off guard was that Gwen didn't chime in at all. I smiled and replied, "I had a really nice time with you all tonight. I'd definitely be up for another evening like this. So who knows, maybe you'll see me back here." And that wasn't just small talk, I meant nearly every word. I had genuinely enjoyed the evening with them and honestly wanted a repeat, but deep down I knew the chances were slim. Not unless Gwen showed up. That was the heart of the issue. I wanted to be near her. I wanted her to want the same. But I also knew that opening that door again would only lead to pain. I kept to myself over the weekend, didn't go anywhere, did nothing worth mentioning. Work kept me occupied during the week, but as Friday crept closer, Buckskins crossed my mind more and more. Sarah had said they were usually there on Fridays, but usually left plenty of room for exceptions. They might skip this week, or only 1 or 2 might show up. And maybe, just maybe, Gwen wouldn't be one of them. By the time my plane touched down from Atlanta on Thursday, I had already decided to go back to Buckskins. And if Gwen was there, well, fine. I had already proven last Friday that I could keep myself in check, leave before I made any bad decisions, like letting Gwen pull me back in. Keep your drinking light and bail the second you start getting ideas, I warned myself. Don't let Gwen get to you again. I rolled into Buckskins around 7 p.m. and saw the Carlos Washington Band listed on the marquee. They were one of my favorite local groups, so I figured it was shaping up to be a decent night. Inside, the music hadn't started yet, just some background tunes playing through the bar's speakers. A few couples were already dancing. I scanned the room and spotted Sarah sitting alone. She noticed me the same moment I saw her and waved me over. I joined her at the table, and she let out a relieved breath. Thank God you showed up. Maybe now those creeps will leave me alone. Wait, I thought that's what I was here for, I joked. She gave me a look. You know what I mean. I come here for the music and the dancing, but when I'm by myself, guys think it's an open invitation. I get it, I said, but a lot of these guys are regulars now. They're not looking for a dance partner. They're just hoping to hook up with someone in the parking lot. And sadly, only the worst kind are making moves tonight. You're safe with me, I assured her. I don't do parking lots. I require a proper bed. Her expression soured, so I quickly added, Kidding, sweetheart. You've got nothing to worry about from me. Her smile returned just as the waitress arrived to take my order. I got drinks for both of us. With the band still not on stage and a few couples swaying to the house music, I asked Sarah if she wanted to dance. She nodded, and we headed to the floor. It was a waltz. Holding her in my arms, I caught myself wondering whether she'd be open to something beyond just dancing, maybe even a real date. So I decided to spend the evening with her and see where it led. We stayed on the floor for 2 songs. As I walked her back to our table, I spotted 3 women I'd danced with on previous visits. 2 of them had been casual flings at one time or another. The third had come close. Thankfully, things had ended before they got too complicated. That made it easier to keep things friendly on nights like this, whether I was just there for the music, a drink, or a dance. Sometimes they'd even still share the floor with me. I was just about to wave the bartender over for another round for Sarah and me when she suddenly said, Oh, look, they actually showed up. I turned to see Gwen and Stacy walking toward us. I had suspected this might happen, and all it really meant was that I'd end up having fewer drinks and heading home earlier than expected. It also meant I wouldn't be able to ask Sarah out tonight, not with Gwen around. The band kicked off their set, and for the next hour, I rotated dance partners between all 3 women. Just like the Friday before, dancing with Gwen was silent. No small talk, no eye contact that lasted more than a beat. Eventually, Sarah and Stacy excused themselves to the restroom, leaving me alone at the table with Gwen. With the music paused for the band's break, the atmosphere had quieted down. I shifted in my seat, scanning the room for a distraction, anything to keep from locking eyes with her, when she broke the silence. What's wrong, Bob? Cat got your tongue? Not really. I just don't know what to say. You could have said you missed me. Or would that have been a lie? No, it wouldn't have been a lie, Gwen. Then why did I never hear from you? Why didn't you reach out? Didn't you think we had something? I thought we did, I admitted. But you know why things ended. I told you that the last time we spoke. I remember that late-night phone call. What I don't understand is why you refused to explain anything. You ignored my calls, dodged me every time I tried to see you. I told you then that I believed we had something worth holding on to, she continued. And you agreed. If you truly believed that, she added, weren't you even the slightest bit curious why I was with someone else? Didn't you want to know the full story? No, Gwen, I said. I didn't want to know. You have no idea how delicate a man's pride can be. The last thing I wanted to hear was that I wasn't enough. That there was something about me that didn't measure up to your expectations. To be honest, I never really felt like I did. So instead of hearing that out loud from you, I shut you out. I acted like a coward. I didn't let you explain anything. You're that insecure? She asked. I sat quietly for a few seconds, then dropped my gaze to the table and replied, Yeah, I guess I am. There have only been two women in my life that I genuinely cared about, and both ended up making me question everything about myself. Both dated other people behind my back. Both gave me reasons to wonder what I was lacking, what was missing in me that made them turn elsewhere. Not just one, Gwen, both. So yes, I'm that insecure? I'm guessing I'm one of those two? I nodded, and she went on. I can't speak for the other woman, but you've got me wrong. I didn't betray you the way you think. If you had just given me the chance to talk, I could have set the record straight. The guy you saw me with, he wasn't someone I was seeing. That was my brother, Dave. She paused for a moment, then continued. He'd flown in from Dallas for a business meeting. I had to stay late at the office, but once he was done with his client, he called and asked if I could grab dinner. We met at Angelo's. It's close to the airport and more convenient than him trying to cross town to my place, especially with the risk of traffic. We ate, I went back to work, and he headed to catch his flight back to Dallas. I sat with her words, turning them over in my mind, trying to decide how to respond. Before I could say anything, Sarah and Stacy returned to the table. There was no way I was going to get into something that personal with them sitting there, so I stayed quiet about what Gwen had just revealed. Then, as if the night hadn't already taken a strange turn, it got even stranger. The band returned from their break just as the girls took their seats. Carlos, the band leader, stepped up to the mic and said, Well, looks like my old pal Bob Talbot is in the crowd tonight. We haven't played this one in a long time, but since he's here, let's dust it off and give it a whirl. I immediately knew what song was coming. It was an old favorite of mine, a smooth piece of Eastern swing. Now the only question was, which of the three should I ask to dance? The moment the opening chords of Ride, Cowboy, Ride echoed through the room, I felt a hand settle on my shoulder and heard a familiar voice say, Get up, Bobby, this one's ours. Turning, I found myself face to face with Melanie Murphy, an old flame, and yes, that song had once been ours. It was the tune that first brought us together way back when. If I had been with a date that night, any one of the three women sitting at my table, I would have politely declined. But I wasn't. So I rose, and Mel and I made our way to the dance floor. We looked good as a pair, always had. Back in the day, we'd even entered a few dance competitions at the Coach House Inn. We held our own. As the final notes of the song faded, Mel gave me a quick kiss on the cheek and whispered, Give me a call. Same number. When I got back to the table, all three women were watching me intently. Sarah was the one who finally said what they were all thinking. So is that our song, Bobby? You've got to tell us the story behind it. I paused for a moment, then launched into the memory. It was a Saturday night, and I was at the old Coach House Inn. Same place, same band that's playing tonight. I didn't have anyone with me that night, just went out for some music. Mel was sitting at a table across the room with three of her girlfriends. At the time, all three of them were out on the dance floor, leaving Mel alone at the table, tapping her fingers in rhythm on the tabletop. Just by watching her, the way she moved in her seat, the way her foot kept time, I could tell she was itching to dance. I wasn't there to just sip drinks and nod along to the band, and as far as I could tell, I was the only single guy around. So I got up, walked over, and asked her to dance. We stepped onto the floor just as the band wrapped up a tune. They'd been playing for a while, so I figured a break was coming. She must have thought the same. Her smile dimmed a bit with disappointment. But then the opening of Ride Cowboy Ride kicked in. She lit up. I asked if she knew Eastern Swing. She grinned and nodded. We danced. When the song ended, the band did finally take their break. I walked her back to her table, and as we went, she said, That was a blast. I really hope they play that one again tonight. When we got to her table, she introduced me to her friends. I excused myself and went to the restroom. On my way back, I stopped by the bar and asked where the band was taking their break. Found them. I walked up to the lead, Carlos, introduced myself, and told him exactly what Mel had said. Then I pulled out $50 and asked if he'd play Ride Cowboy Ride again that night. He waved off the money, said he appreciated someone who genuinely loved their sound, told me it wouldn't fit in the next set, too soon. But if we stayed for one more set after that, he'd make sure it happened. I went back and told Mel the plan. She looked a bit let down, and I asked why. She told me her friends were just about ready to head out, and she'd planned to go with them. I told her not to worry, I'd give her a ride home. Her friends left. I took their spot at the table. Sure enough, during the next set, Carlos came through. Ride Cowboy Ride played again. We danced. There are maybe 5 or 6 decent country western bands in the area, and they tend to cycle through the bars in the neighborhood. After our second dance, Mel went over and asked Carlos where they'd be playing next. On the drive to her place, she told me, and asked if I'd take her there the following weekend. First time a woman had ever asked me out. I said yes without hesitation. That Friday, we showed up at the next venue. Carlos spotted us and played Ride Cowboy Ride not once, but 3 times. The weekend after that, same deal. As soon as he saw us, he opened a set with, "This one's for Bob and Mel," and launched right into our song. We followed the band for a couple of months, and every time, without fail, he'd play Ride at least twice for us. So yeah, I guess you could say it was our song. When I finished the story, I could tell the 3 of them were waiting for something more. Exactly what, I wasn't sure. Stacy finally asked. "And then what?" I looked at her. "I'm not sure I follow you." No surprise there, typical male ignorance. "What happened between you and Mel anyway?" "Nothing major, we were just friends." "Friends who liked to dance?" "Yeah, we had fun dancing. We even entered some competitions together. Did all right?" "All right, how?" Sarah pressed. "We placed second once and third a couple times." Judging by their expressions, they clearly didn't buy the just friends story, and honestly, they had every reason to be skeptical. But it wasn't their business. For the next hour, we chilled out, drinks in hand, snacks within reach, music playing. We all danced, and I took turns with each of them. Despite Stacy's jab about me being clueless, I wasn't exactly blind to the messages she and Sarah were sending on the dance floor. Their body language, the way they leaned in, touched my arm, swayed close, made it clear they were inviting more than just a dance. I'd been thinking about asking Sarah out for a while, but with all 3 women around, the timing never felt right. And Stacy? I wouldn't have turned her down either, but I needed a one-on-one moment to make that kind of move. Had Gwen crossed my mind? No, not seriously. I still saw her as out of my league, safer to admire from a distance than to risk getting burned. Then the band returned from their break. Carlos spotted me and Mel on the floor and, assuming it was like old times, launched into Ride Cowboy Ride. That's when Gwen stood, reached for my hand and said, "This may have been her song with you once, but tonight it's going to be ours." Without waiting for a response, she pulled me up and led me straight to the dance floor. To my surprise, we moved together effortlessly. Everything clicked. As the song ended, Gwen smiled and said, "That was great. We've got to find out where he's playing next week so we can do it again." Back at the table, I was still catching my breath when Gwen turned to Sarah and Stacy and declared, "I know both of you would love a shot at him, but forget it. I told you what we had, and I'm going to get it back, even if I have to drag him kicking and screaming." Then she faced me. "Let's go, cowboy. You're taking me home." I was too stunned to argue. Gwen grabbed my hand and led me out the door. By the time I shook off the surprise, we were already standing beside my car. I opened my mouth to speak, but she put her hand over it. "Not now. Wait until we're in the car." Once inside, she looked at me and said, "You weren't ever going to make a move, were you?" So I did. I was already pulling out of the lot, signaling to turn right. She asked, "Where are you going?" "Taking you home." "Turn left." "But your place is to the right." "True, but your place is to the left," she said, pointing. "To my place? Why would we—" "Wow," she interrupted, moving closer to me. "Stacy called you clueless, but even she didn't realize how clueless." She leaned in more. "I should have locked this down sooner. Took my time because I didn't want to scare you off. But now you need to get us to your house so I can begin your recovery." We got back to my place and things got physical quickly. Sunday night after I dropped her off, she invited me in, but I passed. I needed a decent night's sleep before work Monday, and that was the beginning. From then on, we'd go out a couple times a week, always on Fridays. Those nights always involved live music, usually wherever Carlos Washington was playing. Without fail, he'd play Ride Cowboy Ride for us, twice if not more. Those evenings usually ended in either my bedroom or hers. 6 months rolled by and I was genuinely happy with how things were going. But apparently, I was the only one who felt that way. It was a Tuesday night. We were at Gwen's place having dinner. I was mid-bite, mashed potatoes to be specific, when she said, "Don't make any plans for us this weekend." I swallowed and asked, "Why? What's up?" "We're going to spend the weekend with my parents. My brother Dave's flying in from Dallas." "Wait, why would we do that?" She didn't blink. "My family wants to meet my future husband." "Your future what?" "What do I have to lose at this point? Clearly, you're not blessed with the basic instinct to ask for my hand in marriage. And since you're unlikely to remove your head from its current location anytime soon, I've decided to take control of the situation myself. We're going to visit my family this weekend. My father will greet you with a firm handshake, welcome you aboard, and then quietly inform you that if you ever break his daughter's heart, he'll come after you, and not gently. My mother will pull you into an embrace, rattle off her preferred number of grandkids, and dive straight into wedding arrangements. My brother Dave, he'll shake your hand, look you up and down, and ask where you stand on fishing, hunting, and NASCAR. My sister will give you a big hug, plant a kiss on your cheek, and flirt just enough to make me consider murder. And if you don't put her in her place, I will use a blunt knife and remove your manhood myself. You already know Tony and Alice, so they'll likely stay out of it. My grandparents, on the other hand, will loiter silently in the background, shaking their heads. Granddad might even corner you when I'm not looking and whisper that you should get out while you still can. That's why I'll be spending most of my time making sure he doesn't get the chance. Do you get a say in any of this? Of course you do. There are a handful of useful responses I suggest you start rehearsing. These include, "Yes, sweetheart." "Whatever makes you happy, darling." "As you wish, love." "Absolutely, honey." And the timeless classic, "Your wish is my command, my love." Have you ever stopped to think that maybe the reason I haven't proposed is because I don't actually want to? That wiped the grin right off her face. "You don't want to marry me?" she asked, her voice low. "It's not about wanting. It's fear," I confessed. And then I laid it all out for her. Everything that had been sitting on my chest for too long. She listened, saying nothing, just letting me talk until I had emptied myself. When I finally stopped, she shook her head slowly. "That's quite a story," she said. "But aren't you selling yourself short? What makes you think I'm not right for you?" She narrowed her eyes. "This can't all be about how I look. Or can it?" She must have seen something in my expression. "Go ahead, Bobby. Say it." "I'm just not special, Gwen. I'm in okay shape, not ugly, but nothing to write home about. I've got no dazzling qualities, no money, no charm, no six-pack abs. You, on the other hand, you turn heads when you walk into a room. And one day someone better than me is going to come along, someone with everything I lack, and you'll leave. And I won't survive that." She threw up her hands. "Unbelievable, really. You ever think that all those qualities you think you're missing aren't what matter to me?" "I've looked like this since I was 12, she said. "Guys have been chasing me ever since. I've had men smoother, richer, and yes, smarter than you come after me. But not one of them, not one, had whatever it is that made me want to keep them forever. You've got that, Bobby." I didn't see it at first. Took me a while. But I feel it now. That pull, that instinct that says, "Don't let this one go." "So let's cut through the noise," she continued. "This isn't complicated. You either want me or you don't. I've made my choice. I want you. But this is a two-person dance. If you feel the same, get up and do something about it. As they say out in the country, it's time to make it official, or lose it forever." So what does it mean to be Bobby? Well, for starters, her mother decided 4 grandkids sounded about right and started sketching wedding plans almost immediately. Her brother approved of my views on hunting and fishing, but said NASCAR was a deal-breaker. I made sure her sister Eileen stayed at arm's length. 9 years passed, and her dad never had to break my kneecaps. Oh, and one more thing. Her grandfather did manage to get a word in. He told me to run while I still could. I didn't, and I'm damn glad I stayed. "Ride, Cowboy, Ride" is still our anthem. Carlos performed it 4 times at our reception.